I think I'm live. I think I go live as soon as I mash the button on Zoom, but on my screen, it gives a little progress bar and it takes a while to redirect it to YouTube. But I'm noticing it looks like I'm live as soon as the button gets mashed. So I believe I am live and can proceed. So, hi everybody. As usual, I just need to pop the link on Twitter and then I'll be ready. I still haven't figured out that syncing schedule in advance thing, but that will be nice once you can see it on YouTube when I'm going to be streaming. I won't have to do it this clunky way anymore. Okay. Hi everybody. So today the plan, of course, was to talk about. Yesterday I kind of went through my experiences with in-person community, like all the communities that well, not all, most of the communities I've been a part of in my life. And then COVID hit in 2020. So I figured today I would take up from there and talk about the virtual communities that I learned to create during COVID when I discovered Zoom and Discord and all the technology out there to community build. I wanted to I wanted to share a little bit of feedback that I got from people that have been watching the feed. A friend of mine said that I have a very calming presence, which really surprised me because normally, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, I'm very strongly reacted against for being aggressive and hostile and threatening, and I think it's the male thing, and people find me very anxiety inducing. So to hear that I'm a calming presence is quite a new piece of feedback to me, and I can only imagine that it's maybe the jigsaw puzzle I've been doing kind of relaxes me and puts me in a relaxed state, or that there's nobody get on my nerves because it's just me. But and then my other friend said I was like a gay Cajun satanic Mr. Rogers with autism, and so that was nice to hear. So apparently I come across very differently on these things than a lot of people find me in person. They find me like big scary male. I talk with my hands. I'm tall. So okay, COVID, as you know from the last episode, if you watched, if not, I'll catch you up. One of the very first things I did during COVID. Now remember, we were locked down. We had no idea what the future was going to be, how long we were going to be locked down, anything like that. And I had just lost my job 3 days before. So one of the things there's this Canadian musical artist that I've been following since I was a teenager in high school, and she was giving a virtual songwriting workshop. So I signed up for it because there's nothing else to do. It was lockdown. It seemed like a good opportunity. I'm not a songwriter, but I just wanted to. It was a chance to kind of interact with her and meet some of her fans that I might have a lot of in common with, and try my hand at songwriting. I did write a song. I wrote a set of lyrics, and I have the tune for it. I don't have the musical skill to kind of actualize it. I did play around with the audio workstations, but that was 3 years ago. Nothing really came of it. But what I did get out of taking the class is Zoom, because you had to have Zoom to take the class. So I downloaded Zoom, and when I discovered that you can connect by video, and I know Skype had that feature earlier, but that was like mostly one-to-one, and I never really used it. There was nobody to use it with. But Zoom, so many different events, especially during COVID, were using Zoom. It put you in touch with the entire world. I had the entire world right here on my laptop using video chat, which was similar to the AOL experience back in the late 90s when I had the whole world to chat with in the chat rooms. And that really expanded my social circle, expanded my reach, my opportunities to meet people. I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love meeting people, getting to know people, talking, listening. So I took this songwriting course. It was a couple of weeks, and by the time it was over, we had built up kind of a few virtual friendships with some of the people there. So I offered to keep the experience going for those who wanted it by hosting weekly Zooms, and several people took me up on it, and we had a little group, and we would meet once a week, at least once a week, and we kind of got really close. There were probably 5 or 6, 7 of us, kind of core group. And from there, we expanded to other activities. We took a writing workshop together. So that was the second class I took on Zoom after the songwriting workshop. And that was fun. And so a part of the writing workshop is you do writing practice. It was with Natalie Goldberg, who was one of the people that developed writing practice. So we would meet throughout the week to do writing practice, where you like write for 10 minutes, kind of stream of consciousness in a notebook, and then we read it back to each other. So from that, it kind of expanded into just kind of a creative support group in general. They would share songs and music, and we'd share our writings. Some people share their art, and it was a lot of creative, intelligent, I would say gifted people. And we also ended up talking about mental health a lot. So I started to see the connection between creativity and mental health. So as part of I was involved with a local agency here that ran in-person groups. I ran a lot of my in-person peer groups and some of the autism groups out of their agency. And during COVID, they went virtual. So they had these virtual groups and meetings. So I offered to start an arts group for them, where we explore art and the potential for art and creativity to benefit us, to benefit our mental health and well-being. And so I got to do that for a little while, and I started really getting into how to use creativity and arts to help people improve their mental health. So I was kind of involved in that little scene and network for a large part of 2020. And in addition to that, there was a peer in Texas that was starting her own online peer support business, and I signed on with her, and I started doing the same type of work I was doing in person in Seattle, which is the one-on-one peer support virtually through her business. So that gave me a chance to see that I could take the skill set that I had been using in person and transfer it online, almost unchanged virtually. And that expanded my employment prospects greatly, which came at a very good time, because I definitely needed that. And so at that point, I decided I can do all this myself, just using Zoom. I can do groups. I can do one-on-one peer support. I can create any community that I want to. And that's what I started doing. I started using Zoom to figure out what can I do with this new technology that I just discovered to bring community to those who want it and potentially help improve their well-being in the process. So another thing that happened kind of around the end of 2020, one of the peer groups here was having a virtual Thanksgiving. And so that sounded fun. The idea was that we would all meet on Zoom and we would eat our Thanksgiving dinners together, because everybody was isolated. You couldn't really get together in person for Thanksgiving. So that's what we did. We met 9, 10 in the morning and shared our dinner and talked and watched videos and played songs and danced and till about 10 or 11 at night. We stayed the whole day on this Zoom, and we enjoyed it so much that we did not want it to end. We said, this is too valuable. The connection that we're getting from doing this, engaging virtually, is too valuable. We don't want to lose it. So I had the idea to let's keep it going. I offered to host a peer coffee every morning because I used to host those in person at one of the local Starbucks. So I said, why don't I just, bring back peer coffee? I will be up at 6 a.m. every morning for anybody that wants to come and have coffee. I'll open a Zoom. We made flyers for it. We posted it on social media. And me and another peer every day, 6 a.m., we met and opened this Zoom room and we waited to see who would show up. And at first it was one or two people. Some days it was nobody. But as more and more people showed up and the word got out, it became kind of a steady crowd. And then we decided to, why limit it to just coffee? Why not expand it to the rest of the day like we did with the Thanksgiving Zoom? So we had the idea to create a peer support drop-in. And our goal was to make it 24 hours as much as possible. But it took a while to work up to there. What really helped was, and this is important for community building, virtual or otherwise, you have to have your core group, your core team that's committed to it. It's very hard for one person to just do it on their own long term. Your core team to really that are really invested in the success of the project and have the commitment and the reliability to contribute and keep it going. So we had a team of about 5 or 6 peers that signed on for that. And you got to remember, during lockdown, it was a little easier because no one had any other commitment. They didn't have anything else to kind of draw them away from this. You couldn't leave your house. You couldn't do things outside. So it was a lot easier for people to commit to something like this back then. And so through that team, we took shifts, and like somebody would do it in the morning and then hand it off in the afternoon. And there was one guy that worked at a hotel. He worked the midnight shift and he didn't have anything to do all night. So he offered to keep it going past midnight. He would take like the midnight shift. So between the team members, we were able to keep it going more or less 24 hours as needed. And anybody had the ability to, any of the team at least, had the ability to open up the Zoom if anybody needed it. And it got shut down for whatever reason. So that turned into a 24-hour Zoom drop-in that we kind of promoted it globally, that anybody could show up to, anybody that was socially isolated, wanted to connect, wanted to meet new people. We had peers on the team, like certified peer counselors. So if you were in a crisis or needed to talk, needed peer support, we had breakout rooms that we would create that you could go into. So every time I'd create the room, I would make a list of breakout rooms based on what the needs and interests were, the needs and interests that were emerging so far. Like, for example, some people wanted a room for more quiet, like gentle conversation that was not too boisterous or controversial. Some people wanted a room where you could talk about anything and you could be as crazy and loud as you want and cut up. And so we made different types of rooms for different conversational styles, and then we had different interests. One girl wanted to do an arts and craft workshop. She did a weekly arts and crafts session where people would come and they would make arts and crafts on Zoom together. And one girl even put it on YouTube, kind of featured in her channel, like, here's how to do this particular craft. We had there were a few of them learning Spanish, and so we created a room for them to practice their Spanish together in. We had movie nights, we had game nights, we had open mic nights where artists and musicians and comedians or writers, anybody really that was doing anything creative could come and share their work one evening, and they'd have an audience to share it to. And it was during COVID, that stuff was just so special because it was such a unknown, it was such a creative time. Everything was unknown, kind of anything goes. People were willing to try whatever, and it brought people from all over the globe. And I don't know. I really liked it a lot, and we had the different. So you can make a breakout room for anything. So when you're building virtual communities, you use something like Zoom. If you use Discord, which also has voice and video chat, you could have different channels, which are similar to breakout rooms. But anyway, you can make a main room like a lobby, and you can have. We had a host at all times in the lobby, and people would come in, and they're welcome to stay in the lobby and chat with the host or whoever's in the lobby. It was just a general open space. We called it the back porch. That was the name of our project because a friend of mine, when I first started doing the Zooms, she said, "Your Zooms are so cool." She said, "It's like hanging out on somebody's back porch." And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly the experience I was going for. That's the experience I grew up with. That's the kind of atmosphere I was trying to create, a very casual, down to earth, relaxed space where people could come and just connect and talk about whatever. There's a concept in sociology, and in fact, I'll pull it up on Wikipedia. It's called the third place, and it was developed by somebody named Ray Oldenburg. And Wikipedia lists the characteristics of a third place. It's a social surrounding that's separate from your normal social environments, such as home, which they call the first place, and your workplace, which they call the second place. It's like a church, a coffee shop, your local pub, a bookstore. And these are some of the characteristics of a third place that I try to replicate when I'm creating these community spaces online. It's a neutral ground. Nobody has an obligation to be there. It's completely voluntary. And I tell people that all the time. Do not feel obligated to show up to any of my events or Zooms. It's intrinsic motivation. If you find it valuable, if it helps you, and you want to show up because you get something out of it, that's the reason to show up. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't show up. Don't show up for me. Don't show up out of a sense of obligation. I want it to be organic. So if you are just organically, naturally want to be there, then please show up. There's no ties, no obligations. It's a space you can move in and out of at will. They call it a leveling place. There's no status. I have the Zoom account. I'm the host. I keep it open, but I don't see myself as any higher or than anybody else that shows up on the Zoom. I'm very egalitarian, and I like to create kind of these, in the workplace, they call it flat management styles. Part of that comes from, I think, my Cajun background. Cajuns are naturally anti-authoritarian. We don't have a strong concept of social hierarchy, and you can even see it linguistically, like in the French language as it developed into Cajun French. French has two forms of address, tu, which is informal, and vous, which is more formal, depending on who you're talking to. And in Cajun French, the vous, the formal you, drops out. And so we just have two. Like everybody is addressed with the same pronoun, regardless of rank. They call it equality of rank. So like growing up, the kids were treated the same as the adults. Nobody treated anybody differently based on status. And then the other place it comes from, I think, is the autism. I find from doing a lot of autism groups and working with autistic people that we don't seem to have a strong sense of hierarchy. Like there's, when two autistic people get together, we kind of relate to each other as individuals. There, a lot of status doesn't really come into play. So I think a combination of that makes me naturally suited to these like leveled environments with no strong status stratifications. So another characteristic of the third place, conversation is the main activity. Playful and happy conversation is the main focus of activity in third places. One of the best principles I have found for the community building I do is think very carefully before making any kind of rules. I have no rule. Like none of my communities currently have any rules. I'm not a rules person. I don't need rules. My Discord server doesn't have a channel page of rules. I am of the belief that grown, mature, psychologically mature adults don't need a bunch of rules. I know how to conduct myself when I go into somebody's space. I don't need a page of rules to tell me to be nice and respectful and don't insult people and all that. So I keep the rules to a minimum, non existent if possible, because the less constraints you put on a third space, the more you're going to achieve these characteristics that I'm going through. Now, if you're creating the community or the event for a specific purpose, like you have a definite goal for it, and you want to channel it toward that goal, like a presentation or a class or workshop, then there may be some constraints, that specific constraints that you want to consider and bring in. And I always think the less the better. So the minimal amount of constraints that you need, creative constraints, let's call them, that you need to achieve your goal is optimal. And for my goal of playful, happy conversation, I find 0 constraints to be the optimal number. Like when you go over to your friend's house to hang out, they don't like have a whole bunch of rules that you just, hey, come in. Yeah, we're all hanging out on the back porch, and you sit down and grab a beer or a cup of coffee or whatever, and you just start talking. Like that's what I'm going for with these third places. Accessibility and accommodation, open and readily accessible to those who occupy them. So there's, I'll just touch on this one briefly. There's technological tools that Zoom and these other services provide, like captioning. And I am a big fan of self-accommodation. Like if you know you have certain needs and you're able to accommodate them on your own as best you can, you're going to know best how to accommodate yourself better than I am or somebody else. So where I would substitute, or not substitute, but expand accommodation would be hospitality. You want to create a certain sense of hospitality that's welcoming and makes people feel like you're happy they're there, you're glad to have them there, and makes them feel glad to be there. And again, Cajun hospitality comes naturally to me, but it may be a skill or art that some people will maybe better at than others. But to the extent that you can create a hospitable atmosphere, and one way to do that, or rather to not do that I find, is anxiety. The more anxious and nervous you are about like pulling it off, the less people are going to enjoy it. They pick up on that. Like the more relaxed and comfortable you can be about what you're trying to do with the Zoom or the community, the more your attendees are going to be relaxed and kind of fall into the vibe that you're trying to set. Another feature of third places are the regulars, and I mentioned those earlier, that like core little group of it honestly only take, like I've done it sometimes, the back porch with 2 people, me and this other peer, or 3 peers. If you have 2 or 3 strong, committed people with a good working relationship together, that's invested in the mission and the goal of whatever you're trying to create, you can create a core group of regulars from that. Eventually you might expand to 4 or 5 or 6, but having that set of regulars gives the space its tone, sets the mood and characteristics of the area, and it also brings in newcomers. When you go into a space where people are comfortable with each other, they have existing relationships, and they're able to integrate you into that and connect you into that network instead of making you feel like a fifth wheel or an outsider, that's very valuable for creating one of these third places. And so having that core group of regulars with that skill set can help do that. It says a low profile. Third places are characteristically wholesome, which wholesome is not a word that I normally associate myself with or have associated with me. But yeah, okay, I'll go with that. The inside of a third place is without extravagance or grandiosity and has a homely feel. Now, homely, yes, I can cop to homeliness. I'm very rustic and down to earth. Third places are never snobby or pretentious and are accepting of all types of individuals from different walks of life. The second thing about Cajuns, and remember, a lot of my community building passion and skill comes from my Cajun upbringing and Cajun background. So it's like community building with a Cajun touch. There's two things I've always said about cages that Cajuns cannot stand or have a hard time tolerating, and that's authority. We talked about the egalitarianism and lack of status, and pretentiousness. Like those are the two things that we will probably never be able to assimilate or accommodate ourselves to. And so I find it very easy to keep these kind of wholesome, homely, non-pretentious places. So to the extent that you can do that, you're increasing your chance of having a successful community, third place community at least. And I'm mostly touching on the third place types because that's the type that I've been creating over the last 3 years and that I'm best at and that I prefer the most. The mood is playful. The tone of conversation in third places is never marked with tension or hostility. Witty conversation and frivolous banter, not only common but highly valued. Now, it can get tense, like especially if it's mental health communities or autistic, like neurodivergent. There's friction and we clash sometimes. It's knowing how to manage the conflict when it happens and not to stigmatize it. It's a natural part of community building. There's a Ralph Rickenbacker on the Third Factor magazine has an excellent article that pulls from some of Scott Peck's work on community building of how to go from what's called a pseudo community, which is kind of the superficial level where everybody tries to play nice and not and avoid conflict or controversial topics, to authentic community, which is where you work through the conflict and you build the relationships that are able to kind of sustain and hold the conflict. And so I don't provoke conflict on my Zooms, but if they happen, I manage them and I try to restore that sense of playful conversation afterwards. And I can be, I have PTSD. I am temperamental just by nature. So when somebody says something that is striking me the wrong way, I can get tense or hostile too. But I'm able to talk through it and work through it and keep the sense of it doesn't damage the sense of community. So that's a good conflict resolution, and conflict management is a very good skill to have when you're building community. And the last one they list is a home away from home. It's a place to hang out and make connections outside of your normal day-to-day network. And when we're talking virtual, like it's outside of your normal real life network. You can meet people that are outside of your region or other parts of the country and with, different backgrounds and perspectives and interests. So there's a lot of variety. And it says it has the same feelings of warmth, possession, and belonging as you would in your own home, which goes back to that kind of back porch feeling. And I think I mentioned yesterday on my Zoom that our house was kind of always the hangout house that all the neighborhood kids and even the adults, because my mom had a lot of friends too, would come and hang out with. So I kind of grew up with it. Our home being that home away from home feeling for a lot of people. Okay, that's the third place characteristics. Now I'll get back to kind of some of my examples of virtual community building. So we had this back porch drop-in Zoom going that was centered around providing social, recreational, creative, and mental health support during COVID, during the lockdown. Another thing that developed during the wokeness kind of really flared up, you had the Floyd riots. I happened to watch the Benjamin Boyce's Evergreen documentary about the same time. And so all of this started to go off in my head about there's something going on the left that is just bizarre and troublesome. And then the Chaz happened 5 blocks from my place. I watched the Starbucks outside my window get set on fire 3 times. There were riots, just like one street. I could see it out my window, one street over. So all of that just really hit home for me. And I started to question my commitment, allegiance, loyalty to the left. And so and I started to notice it start to encroach in the mental health world, which was my field. And some of the trainings I went to, like during COVID, I went to several virtual mental health trainings to like peer support. And I'm not sure we talked about one single topic that was mental health related. It was all racism and equity and diversity and how to integrate this group. And can we talk about depression or trauma? Or like, can we do one training on something related to peer support? So I kind of started to see a change in the mental health approach under this new thing that was happening in 2020 that showed up on my social media as wokeness, which had roots before 2020, but that's kind of when it became got on my radar and in the public eye. So as a result of all of that, there was an organization formed called Critical Therapy Antidote, CTA for short, and it was for mental health professionals and clients and students, anyone with a stakeholder in mental health, with a stake in mental health. So we kind of all met, this was towards the end of 2020, and started forming really strong connections almost right away, because we were like each other's sanity. Like, this is really happening, right? This is fucked up, right? This is really going on. Yeah, dude, it's bad. It's happening in my practice too, in my workplace. And so I started doing Zooms for CTA. We started doing weekly Zooms, and we would meet regularly. And so we had a little core group of it. Was the same pattern. Like, we had a little core group forum. It was an open space to have conversations. And then shortly after that, or around the same time, Counterweight Forum, Helen Pluckrose's organization out of the UK, to help support people that were struggling with social justice ideology in the workplace. And CTA became a partner with Counterweight to kind of provide they had what's called listening sessions, which was kind of what I was already doing. It was kind of peer support for people that were struggling with social justice, which I had just discovered that community myself. So I could definitely relate, and was learning how to give the kind of support that population needed. So as part of the CTA partnership with Counterweight, I started doing the weekly Zooms, or some of them. We had several people doing them, but I was doing them regularly. I worked up to twice a week for a while. I did them for probably over a year. I was there every single day, sometimes twice a week, holding these spaces so that people could come and share their experiences with social justice in their lives, in their workplaces. And then eventually Counterweight shifted their mission, and the people that were doing it moved on to do other things. I think they have Solid Ground going right now, which is Leslie Elliott, Jennifer Friend, Jody Shaw. They have a website. There's several Solid Ground websites out there. I'm not sure what theirs is. Let me see if I can find it. I want to be accurate. And then Leslie Elliott, who was part of CTA as well, has her Radical Center podcast on YouTube, which is excellent. Maybe it's Solid Ground Support. Just look real quick. Solid Ground Support. Is that them? Yeah. Yeah, Jody, Leslie, Jen, and David. So it morphed the Counterweight stuff. It didn't morph into, they kind of went on their own and did the Solid Ground, but we were all working together in Counterweight doing similar work. And then after that, or in addition to that, like, these are some other activities I was doing in the meantime. We had book clubs going. I love doing book clubs. If anybody wants to do a book club, let me know, especially big, long, nerdy book clubs like intellectual history, or like Freud, the works of Freud, or psychoanalytic theory, or philosophy book clubs. If you want to read Nietzsche, get with me. We'll do a Nietzsche book club. So I did several book clubs, and I started getting into podcasting. So me and some people from CTA and Counterweight started the New World Chaos podcast. It was either at the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. And getting back to community building, one thing we noticed from that podcast, and we noticed it very early after just a few episodes, that this little community of regulars was starting to form in the comments section. So we wanted a way to interact with them and have the podcast be part of some larger project than just audience and presenter. And so we created a Discord, and a lot of them joined the Discord, and we would invite them on the show as well. At the end of the show, we'd run for about an hour, and then we would take guests or callers, and you could come on the Zoom with us and continue the discussion. And some people took us up on it a few times. But what was really fascinating to me was the Discord, like the virtual community that started to form around this podcast we were doing called New World Chaos. And so we started promoting the Discord and growing the Discord and bringing in all of these really bright, creative, intelligent, highly gifted people. And we called ourselves creative problem solvers. And we were going to put our heads together and not only solve for COVID, like we're in the middle of a pandemic, what can we do with this opportunity? Like one guy started an online university, and one guy started a consulting business, and we started doing crypto stuff. All kind of like how can we maximize this opportunity creatively and to create something positive for the future that maybe didn't exist before. And DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which was something crypto and blockchain related. We were working toward forming some sort of DAO. And so in addition to the creative problem solving around COVID, it was around wokeness as well. Like this ideology is capturing everything. We're going to need alternatives. How can we form these alternatives of highly self-determining, autonomous, individualistic people that needed a community? It was a community of individuals. So people with a strong sense of individuality and that value the individual and personal freedom, they're not going to be drawn or integrate well into a more collectivist community where you kind of have to submerge your individuality to become part of the larger group. They need a group that can support the sense of individuality they bring to it and not conflict with it. So that's what we were trying to create. We were working on how do strongly, highly individualistic people come together and form a community and benefit from what community has to offer while still respecting each other's values around autonomy and individuality. And I would say it was a success. We gave each other a lot of respect, a lot of room, a lot of creative support. Again, there weren't a lot of rules because we didn't need them. There wasn't a lot of pressure to get people to conform to some group norm. The group norm was what the individuals themselves brought to the community. And it kind of goes with the quote from that paper on the Gifted School I started with yesterday about having no preconceived notion of what's best for your community and letting the people show up and building your community around their interests and needs and values. So that's what we did with this New World Chaos community. And eventually, I think what happened is when COVID started to wane, or at least the things started to open up, the vaccinations allowed people to kind of return to their normal life. A lot of communities I saw at the time kind of started to disperse, and that it kind of went the way of the rest of those communities. But I've always been trying to create something similar to that with whoever's interested. So if you do want to create, well, we do it in my men's group, actually. I'd say that's a very strong, highly individualized, autonomous community. So that's kind of another layer of community building that I discovered that I like to bring into the communities that I personally develop is third place type kind of back porch communities, and then also communities for individuals where your individuality drives the community, because it's really strong individuals when you get together, and I've mentioned this before, they create that larger sense of community that's greater than any one person, and then that feeds back into and strengthens each member's sense of individuality. So it's kind of a positive feedback loop that gets created when you have the right people. Podcast, I did a few more podcasts. We were part of Hold My Drink for a while. I think that podcast is now doing something out of Institute for Liberal Values. The Dissidents, I think is their name, with Jennifer Richmond and her crew. I was involved in some gifted communities I'm really good at creating communities for gifted people. I'm involved in one now that's going really well because I think of my experience at this residential gifted program. We did some role playing groups, gaming groups. We had I mentioned yesterday, a Jackbox games group from the Twitter crowd that I was part of that we met pretty regularly and played games and connected over that. The groups I'm part of now, I have my men's group that I mentioned. And that's a group that I kind of, I've been wanting to do men's mental health work. So about a year ago, I shifted exclusively to men's mental health. And then I kind of discovered that neurodivergent men is where my strength lies because I am one. So gifted, autistic, ADHD, whatever kind of weirdness makes you, gives you that added kind of challenge or struggle in addition to everything that men struggle with. So, but that was a recent development. Initially, I wanted, like, I was part of the men's group community in the 90s, the Robert Bly Mythopoeic men's movement. And so I wanted to continue that kind of work and just men's work in general, because men are kind of going through it right now in society. We're more targeted now and stigmatized than I remember being in my lifetime growing up. We're kind of the new gay. Like growing up, it was the gay that I was a target for, and now it's the maleness I'm a target for. So I wanted to help that population, particularly with mental health support and kind of just general life support. So I developed this. There was an existing men's group that it kind of spun off from, and we have our little core group again. We're always open to more. We're definitely recruiting more men for the group. We like men from all backgrounds, all religious backgrounds, all professional backgrounds, all social, economic backgrounds. Whatever your mental health need or just your support need. It's very important for men to have a community of other men. There are things that men get from men that they can't get from any other group. And I would say that about any group, any identity facet. There are things that autistic people need from each other that they can only get from other autistic people. There are things that gifted people need that they can only get from other gifted people, etc. So I'm trying to fill a need right now for what men can get from other men, the particular type of support that men are able to get from other men. And so we have that going currently. And then I mentioned my Gifted Twice Exceptional group. And just for those that don't know, twice exceptional is an educational term in the American education system. Exceptional means exception from the norm. And it's just what kind of services you get if you're in the public school system. If you get special ed services for a disability like autism or ADHD, that's considered one exception. If you get gifted services, that's a second exception. So you're coded as twice exceptional, 2E. And it kind of became a term to describe neurodivergent gifted people, which I personally believe giftedness itself is a form of neurodivergence. But I know people who are gifted and have giftedness and are otherwise neurotypical. They have no other form of neurodivergence. So it's kind of to distinguish, even within the gifted community, between the more neurotypical gifted, and again, it's a threshold term. So there's not a specific cutoff point where someone stops becoming neurotypical and starts becoming neuroatypical. It's just whenever the traits become prominent enough and noticeable enough to lead you to identify that way, or if they're causing obvious obstacles in your life or impacting your life somehow. So it's for gifted, twice exceptional adults. And I had the good fortune growing up to be part of that residential gifted community of people my age. It was teenagers, basically. And so I got a lot of that peer development, but a lot of people that grow up to be adults that maybe were never identified as gifted or didn't have access to other gifted peers, I'm seeing a lot of them get that now for the first time in some of these gifted groups and communities that I'm helping to create. And it's truly one of the most beautiful things to see right now. Watching gifted people come together for the first time. And I'm using gifted kind of for this example, but I think this would apply to any group that center around a particular trait or identity aspect. But watching gifted people come together and be able to talk to each other about giftedness and have really deep, nerdy, extended conversations with each other about their passions and special interests. It's amazing to see. It's definitely like my whole life's mission, I've said before, is to bring what I got from that gifted program and the founder, who was a dear mentor for me, and bring that to as many people as I can that didn't have that experience. I think it has great value for both gifted teens and adult gifted, because you never stop needing that peer group and the mirroring that comes from that peer group, and because that's what drives your growth and development, at least on the gifted axis, the gifted part of you. So I'm involved with that. I'm involved with the men's group. I'm started live streaming, so I'm hoping to create a community around this live stream. And I'm involved in a few other live streams. There's a little live stream community on YouTube, and what I'm noticing some common features, and they're very similar, almost identical to the features that emerged from the New World Chaos podcast we did a couple of years ago. They have a live stream and or a podcast. I prefer live streams because you get that live interaction with your viewers and you can interact through the comments, which hopefully one day I will get to do once I figure out how to get YouTube to like schedule in advance so that people can prepare to show up. Right now I'm just spontaneously going live when I have a chance each day and posting it. So they have a core group of commenters. There's a community that forms in the comment section of commenters that watch the live stream. The live streamers themselves are able to interact with the commenters, which like we did on our podcast as well. They almost all have a Discord, so there's a space to connect outside of just the live stream, just the discrete time period that the live stream allots you. And so the community that's building in the comments has a place to grow outside of that. Discord also provides video and voice chat, so you can Zoom and have face-to-face conversations outside of the because if you're watching a certain live stream that's themed around a certain topic or political leaning or cultural whatever, like if it's a cultural niche, chances are the people in that comment section are going to have things in common, and you only need one or two things in common to make a bridge to connect with somebody. So they're able to interact on the Discord outside of the podcast, so we get to know each other better through there, and it's another layer of intimacy. And intimacy is not a dirty word. You don't have to be scared of it. It feels good. We're social creatures. It feels good to connect with other human beings that we share the planet with. And by intimacy, that's all I'm talking about, is just a deeper connection over interest or common experiences or shared values, shared personality traits, whatever. So they're able to connect through the Discord. The live stream kind of is a point of contact. You want to have as many points of contact when you're growing a community. So I mentioned yesterday, when you form a community, you want to give them something to do. Give them conversation to participate in. Give them a game to play, a movie to watch, a workshop, a topic, a speaker, but bring them together. And you can have these open third place Zooms, and I think it's good to have a regular weekly third place. But in addition to that, try to have some activities outside of that kind of channel that energy into something constructive, productive, or even just recreational, because recreation can bond people together too. There's vasopressin bonding, oxytocin bonding. People can bond through all kind of shared experiences. So you have the live stream, you have the Discord, and it kind of feeds each other. So as the live stream grows, the comment section grows, which means the Discord grows. But as the Discord grows, that's more people that feed into the live stream. And before you know it, you have this little community similar to the one that we had a few years ago. And then there's like a little ecosystem forming between the live streamers. So I'll go on this person's live stream, or I'll hang out in their comment section. They'll come on mine, hopefully, and hang out once I build mine up, and we share. So you have the individual communities, but then the communities that have similar interest or similar the things that tie them together, something larger than just like my community is not really themed. It's because I'm just experimenting and finding my way now. But I mean, you all know my common threads by now: autism, giftedness, men's work, gay, which is not really that big of a deal anymore. I don't count that as I wouldn't center a community around just gay. Satanism, I'd love to have a satanic community. Philosophy, mental health. So like you might have a cluster of communities, of these live stream communities, 5 or 6 of them, that will start to share members, or the members will start to move between them, and that creates kind of a larger cluster of community. And that's where you get stuff like the Manosphere or BreadTube on YouTube, or the Crucible has like a little network of similar podcasts. Like there's the debate YouTube, where they're all centered around debating, and different guests will go on each other's debate channels. So that's another scale or layer of community from the individual live streaming. So each live streamer, or a group of live streamers, because sometimes it's a team of 2 or 3, will center a community between the comment section and the Discord that they start. And then this larger network between 5 or 6 live streamers will start to form. And then you get like a sphere or an ecosystem. And so that's some things I'm noticing currently about these live stream communities that I'm part of. And I'm looking to see what I can do with that and how I could take that further. So it's coming up on an hour. I guess I've touched on all the things about virtual community building I can think of. If you have any questions about either in-person community building or virtual community building, or you want assistance or tips or suggestions, I don't mind like hearing your goals and what you might be trying to do, and offering some tips or insights where I can, just based on my experience. I plan to offer that eventually as a service through my business, but I definitely don't mind helping out right now. So just email me as usual. It's primalhex, primalhex @gmail.com, or on Twitter under the same name. And if you want to be a guest on the show, we can talk about different topics. I don't always like just hearing myself drone on and on for an hour. It would be nice if you want to hop in the comments and start a conversation there. We can interact and maybe draw other people in. So I guess that's all I have today. If there were commenters, I would take questions or comments. And outside of that, I'll be here tomorrow. I don't know what the topic tomorrow is going to be yet. Something came up. Oh, let me review some Twitter. I think I'll end with that. Something came up this morning that I thought would make a good topic, but I've already forgotten it. So it'll have to loop back. But let's let me take a look at Twitter. Conspiracy theories, overconfidence. Yeah. I'm not a big conspiracist. I'm too skeptical and rational, and I don't like to assume psychological motivations until I'm absolutely pretty. I mean, you never know 100%, but until I have more of a sense of assurance that I'm on the right track. Check my bookmarks. Oh, this is an interesting one. Gynocentrism, which is like female centered, for positive feedback factors that reinforce gynocentrism, which is definitely, you can see it in our culture today. Romantic love, like you elevating the female chivalry. Psychological narcissism is female self-orientation. I notice a lot of narcissism on the left, or the progressive left rather, or what looks like narcissism. Gamma bias is when you like things are happening to both genders, but you tend to downplay the effects on one gender and overplay the effects on another gender. And so gamma bias is something to look out for too. Like women abuse men just as, I don't know, just as much, but both men and women can be abusive and can be victims of abuse. But the gamma bias would be the narrative that it's mostly women that are victims and mostly men that are the abusers. So you tend to downplay the instances where the woman is the abuser and the male is the victim. And then institutional, that's happening more and more too, I notice. Women have, and I don't know about all women, but definitely the like middle class professional women, at least up here, seem to have different needs, different tolerances for things, different values, different areas of focus. So it's hard to integrate all that into one workplace. And I find that in order to integrate the women, they tend to make policies and rules that alienate the men or diminish what the men are able to do or express about themselves. I've certainly run into that in my workplaces. So I guess that's another topic. Maybe that could be one for tomorrow. I'm trying to kill out the hour, really, is all I'm doing. So, let's see, more random Twitter stuff. Okay, that's old news. I wish I could remember the topic that came up this morning. What was it? Maybe it was BDSM. People complain, or like, I never pay attention to outside groups. So people that weren't gay, I didn't care what they thought about homosexuality. They were too far removed from the phenomenon for me to take their opinion seriously or to have credibility. So people that are not into BDSM, they'll say things like it's unhealthy, or they'll say that with porn or violent video games or rap music. And I tend to not listen to that. If you're not into BDSM, then I'm probably not going to pay attention to what you have to say about it unless you can convince me. But there is this belief that BDSM is or can be unhealthy, which anything can be unhealthy, but that it is kind of inherently unhealthy. And there's that thought about porn too. And I find BDSM and porn both very healthy. They both contribute to my mental well-being. And so maybe I can talk about that narrative tomorrow. We'll see. If you have ideas of your own or want to send in topics for me to babble on about, I'll be more than happy to. But other than that, I guess I'll call it a day today. And actually, I got like one more minute to kill. And then tomorrow I'll come back with something else. And I'm going to play around with OBS, which is a live stream software. So maybe I can use OBS to sync up to YouTube so I can start scheduling these better in advance. And then maybe I'll get more people show up. So today's Tuesday? Tomorrow's Survivor. So I'm excited for that. And I guess that's it. It's 5:00. I did about an hour. Okay, well, good knowing that you're out there if you are, and I will see you tomorrow for another one. Okay, take care.